How this topic came about is through the experience that we're having, and most recently, a lot of challenges that our residents and our clients and their families face. And we know that this is probably a very common experience for us, the professionals in the field. And so when we were talking about wanting to talk about this topic and a common ground, you two were the two that came to mind immediately. And what an exciting conversation that would be, given your backgrounds and experience. And so we wanted to ask you guys a couple of questions about working with young adults and their families. So, you
Can't
guys
think
ready?
of greater experts on that population than the two of you.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you.
Literally both have decades of experience and quite a following, both of you, following of families and individuals that really believe in your work and your message.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Yes, yes.
Now, do you preface, are you going to, because boy, common ground, I mean, collaborative care, you know? I mean, are you going to like put something out there to say something? I mean, like, how's that done?
So I think that's a great question. You know, the idea of common ground is something that you and I, Lori, have practiced for decades, right? So I think we were doing collaborative care before it was a thing. And, you know, you always have partnered with the recovery residences, continuing care. You've always started planning for the next step the minute the individual came into treatment. And that, I don't know if you understand how innovative that was at the time. And today, it's just now starting to become the standard of care so many years later that we have to start planning for next steps, because when we're working with any kind of mental health issue, we've got to plan for the long haul. It's not just stabilization. It's going to be a long haul and a process, and you have always known that, Lori, and you've always served treatment up in that way with that understanding. So maybe this isn't what we plan to talk about, but I think it's a great intro to it. How did you know to do that?
It's interesting you ask, because I wanted, when I was working in more of a residential treatment setting, I wanted to recognize that it was actually going to take a longer time, and for the patients that were there to be able to, who were young and who didn't really need to go back home and expect that they and their families were going to be able to work together and to be able to grow without some sort of separation, individuation, which is the life stage that they're in. So that's when I really, in the development of the young adult programs, that was their process, is to get them out of the house and to help they and their families do their parallel process of individual work.
Yeah. It's instead of going to college, many of those we served went into care treatment, right? And so so much of that task of individuation in college we were actually doing, right? And I think that's true for us now at Hope, right, y'all? That this is that practical life experience is the second step towards being a full-on adult, individuation, as you say, Lori.
Now that is really spot on. Speaking to, following up with what Lori said, and what we've realized here at Hope is, and even in personal recovery, is that we have to have something in place that's going to help to continue establishment of new habits, right? And in the treatment setting, it's one thing to establish a new habit, but I think that in my experience, we don't really see the unlearning of the old habit, right? We can just add something in and we can figure out how to check boxes and do what they're asking us to do, because if I can do this correctly, I'll be out in X amount of times. Whereas the continuum of care says, no, we want to give you the opportunity to practice this so that it becomes part of who you are, part of what you're about, and at the same time unlearn those habits that have been detrimental to your upbringing, to your growth. So I think that that's an excellent way to be able to do that, to start planning it from day one.
And I would say overall that for a young adult, whether the young adult's coming from a residential setting, I work with Karen, and Karen has a young adult program that's gender specific there. And they really need the step down, and they need to not be going home. At the same time, in an outpatient setting where you're the therapist and you're seeing them, or you're even a parent and you're seeing all these behaviors start to emerge, it's really important to step up the level of care and offer that containment and that opportunity for the parents to start developing new habits themselves, as opposed to being overly inundated and consumed with their young adult. So that increase in a level of care is just incredible, that you can really do it both ways, but still both have to be working on their process of change.
Do you think that's the most challenging aspect of working with young adults, is that you're working with a whole system? Or what would you say, and this is to each of you or one of you, whoever wants to take it, what's the most challenging aspect of working with young adults?
Well, I'll jump in there, Lori, and then you follow up with the family aspect. But for the young adult piece, for me, it's been their motivation. Like, what is their motivation for being here? In treatment, it's real funny. When I first started working in treatment, when I was doing education, I would always ask them, "Why are you here?" I would just go up and write on the dry erase board, "Why are you here?" And the answers are, "My mom, my probation officer, my doctor, right." So there's all this external motivation, but once they get to this level, we are hopeful that through allowing them to connect with their peers, right, to connect with other people, and that's a hard part to answer the question, that connecting, figuring out that we need to connect to people that are moving in a similar direction, because they come in feeling like they're all alone in this. This is a personal endeavor. This is something I've got to accomplish myself. This is what's been ingrained in me. So learning to help them, to empower them, to recognize that they're here today because of something that they can accomplish, something that they can move themselves towards. And it's hard to get them to that point. It's the equivalent of being taught to color inside the lines, and then one day you say, "Well, to heck with this, I'd rather color outside the line and see what I get," right? Coming back here, it's real funny when you start to see how, when you allow a young adult to have freedom, that they want to be confined and they want to be structured and they want to be shown what to do. But then you get the resistance piece, right? And so that's another aspect of it, the resistance, the feeling that I've made mistakes. I haven't lived up to my expectations. Those cause, that resistance, which keeps them from actually establishing uh, connections. So those are some of the biggest hurdles that I've seen.
And as you were talking, Ray, what I was thinking about was overall ambivalence. So somebody who's leaving home but really isn't ready, doesn't feel prepared, and their family members have not experienced them behaving as ready. And then you add the mental health piece or the substance use piece coming into it. And everybody's so ambivalent, they're giving each other mixed messages. So it's really hard for them to separate gracefully and to go through some of the challenges. And when you have a life-threatening illness, like substance use that really progresses quickly and creates a lot of fear, that while the family members may have wanted to be letting go, that's complicated now. So they really don't know what to do. And what do? We parent, we hover, we control as family members. And it's not just parents, there's siblings involved doing their thing too. So I think what's really makes it hard is that the overall sabotaging of the growth process is occurring out of a lot of ambivalence that they've not really established healthy coping skills to deal with.
That is so beautifully put. And one thing you said really stood out, which is you used the phrase letting go gracefully. And you talked about what makes it hard for them to do that is that there's this life-threatening illness. How do you define letting go? What does that mean? What does that look like?
So, and it's interesting because I know that we're not only speaking to families, we're also speaking to therapists and coaches and other people that are treating. How do we all let go in a way to actually offer the path of development for a young adult? We all can find ourselves enabling versus supporting. It's a very tricky balance. And when we're looking at codependence coming up and trying to determine for parents, what is parenting and what is codependence? It's a very fine line. So in order to really successfully let go, we have to look at where we are as individuals in the whole process and what our challenges are, and then determine how we're going to take the steps to offer the opportunity for each of us to start doing our work.
Mm.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Lori. Very well put. I think, in our experience, especially running that family piece, the support groups that we facilitate, right? It's I see that time in and time again. There's the thought, the idea that the young adult there's no world that exists that this young adult is going to be capable to thrive in without my assistance, right? And so it's like the need to inborn need for parents, especially to step in and say, okay, well, this is what needs to happen. We're going to fix this, and then we're going to make this okay. So learning how to let go of that piece, and as you put, for everybody, because I mean, it's we have a tendency to really get entrenched with our clients, right? We do. And so it's being able to allow them to experience what they need to experience in order, that struggle that is so necessary to the growth process. And it is hard for us to watch it sometimes, just because it's just like, are they going to be able to move past this? Are they going to be able to move through this one on their own? And what can I do to support and coach, right? It's a tricky process.
that I'm spinning with what you all are saying, and where I find myself right now is as that mom, because you're just speaking to my heart.
Mm.
And having been that mom, Ray, it's not even that conscious. It's not conscious at all. It's not a thought. It's a reaction.
A reflex.
Because we have been, as parents of these young adults that are struggling, we have been in hyper vigilant, hyper everything mode for years sometimes. So we are at this heightened place of, anxiety, panic, whatever you want to call it. It's heightened. We're firing on all cylinders, hyper vigilant. And so now my loved one, is somewhere else, so I can breathe for a minute. But then I have not stopped firing in my brain. So to have somebody tell me, well, now it's time to take care of yourself, that does not compute.
We're in survival mode. We're at the base of the pyramid, and you're saying, take care of yourself, like it's at the top of the pyramid. And I'm like, what? I'm at the bottom of the pyramid. And I don't think people realize what I mean by pyramid, but I'm thinking about Maslow's hierarchy.
Yes.
And we're in survival, life and death, stay alive, keep your kid alive, keep your family member alive mode. And you're going, it's okay to breathe, and it's okay to think about what you want next in your life. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? That's too high of the peer. Like, I can't. How do we get out of that hijacked place? And what have you seen work for that?
And because all of it's trauma.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And
Right.
so it's trauma for the young person who may have had a mental health crisis that could have been on the heels of already dabbling and doing different types of drugs, because that is the age when a lot of the different mental health issues will emerge. The other thing about the trauma is that that's where we are, and that's what you described. What I like to do is I really like to help people look at things relationally. And it's exactly what you're saying, because the first level of consciousness is about 5%. That's our immediate awareness of what we're saying and what we're doing in response to a person as they're speaking to us or a situation. Second level of consciousness goes the other 95%. That's all unconscious, because not only are we dealing with this trauma, but what about all those other things that have happened in our lives as people? So it makes it hard to deal directly with each other relationally. And that's what I try to do to break it down, to help the families and also the young person start to look at what's going on with me? What am I telling myself through all of this? And how do I need to really develop a different relationship with each other? The parents become people too. The young adult becomes a person. And then we start helping that communication and that awareness, increasing the awareness of what's going on inside of us.
For sure. That very well put, Lori. Then when we were talking, because when we were talking about the examples that you and I shared, we're doing family group, recognizing, helping the family recognize that they have not failed. That's where there's a big chunk of stigma that comes from, if I can't fix the problem that my young adult is having right here, then I'm a failure. And so it's like, it was even real funny how many times people have chose to want to talk about a different subject, like, can we talk about something else? Let's not bring that up, right? But recognize it. And Lori and I were talking before this, and she shared a situation where we were in our support group, and the young adult came into the group and was having a hissy fit about this and about that and about how life is terrible and recovery is terrible, and I'm like so ready to relapse, and it's killing me, right? And the parent, right, the young adult's parent was sitting there, and Lori asked that parent to check in, and the parent checked in and says, "Oh, my program's working really good. Everything seems to be good where I'm at." And that's like classic. The family is learning how to let go and recognizing that we have a program, we have a life to live too. So how do I take hold of that and refocus on what my dreams, aspirations, my passions were all about, and how I've allowed them to get sidetracked because of the codependent traits that come from wanting to know what's going on with you, and not being able to differentiate between the line, caring for and caring about. So
Ray,
great
what
stuff, good
happened?
stuff.
So what happened in that moment when parent or Lori,
Oh,
you
it was beautiful. It was beautiful because the young woman had 2 years in recovery. So that meant the parent, who also was doing Families Anonymous groups and working on herself and her own individual therapy, they were beyond the crisis. So it actually was something where it didn't feed all of that drama that was going on with the young person. And it allowed the group to actually just sort of help the whole process. And within a short period of time, she was diffused and calmed down and was able to get back to, what was going on with me and how am I going to work on it. So it's
because the family didn't bring that reactivity, which perpetuated or fueled the process even more, right? It's like depriving a fire of oxygen, right?
Yeah, but and also it empowered her. That's
That's
a
right.
beautiful illustration because it gave her her own recovery, right? And very empowering. And so it was her decision. She wasn't defocused on, well, now they're upset, and it was all hers.
mhm, mhm,
That's
absolutely.
powerful.
It's a great story.
It is.
It's a great story.
And the family members that continue in the support groups, the Families Anonymous groups, and work in their own programs, they start out being there for their loved ones, and they end up developing themselves, because that's, speaking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just our stages of development, we're all in process. So it's really gives every person a chance to work on themselves in a beautiful way. And how many young people are acting out some of the stuff that they may experience in their world, which is pretty tricky right now, and their life, but also are experiencing and acting out some of the stress and some of the anxiety that's going on in their families. So, what better way for everybody to get better and become the best version of themselves, as they say, by having all of us work on our own stuff?
Mm, yes. There's
Good.
a lot of wisdom in that.
Mhm.
So
Thank you, Guy.
I've heard you all really talk about a lot of hope in that story, especially. What else gives you hope when you work with individuals and their young adults and their families?
Well, for the young adult, for me, what gives me hope is when they start recognizing that they can do this, right? They start to show signs that, hey, I'm not being nitpicked on the things that are not going well, I'm being supported in the things that are working well, right? And that's one of the key components we bring in therapy and residential recovery and all the aspects of coaching, right? Is we want to build on this positive foundation. And so when they see that, and they actually see that, some of the best moments that I've experienced come from them actually getting a job and then them actually starting to plan financially, and they bring their budgets and we sit down and we work out a budget plan, and next thing we realize is, you know what, if I keep going like this, I'm going to soon be able to afford my own place. And it gets real tricky at that point, right, for them. But there's the anxiety comes up, and it's just like, hey, we're good. Let's just keep rolling. Let's talk about that anxiety. Let's learn to embrace the feeling as it is without having to change or alter it. And teaching them that, to me, is I mean, that's the key to happiness, the ability to embrace all of your emotions as they are and accept ourselves in the midst of what we do well and what's not working so well, and be able to process that with people that understand, which goes to the family piece that I'll let you highlight, Lori, because that's also important in this aspect too.
Well, and really everything you said applies to the family, and it applies to us as therapists and people treating families and young adults, because we have to get to that place when you talk about letting go of accepting what we can and can't do and what we can and can't fix, what our response is. And so to move it into really what gives me hope is being a part of that process. And, working with Hope Recovery Resources, working with Karen, where I see people coming from residential programs into the intensive outpatient programming, when they have something like like Hope Recovery Resources to have that level of support, then they have a whole team. They and their family have a whole team. So in that situation, watching how they navigate just what Ray said, and that is, I'm starting to realize what I can do something about and how I can really work on me and how I can navigate the different situations that come up and respond rather than react. And again, learning a whole lot about that through having a peer support of family members. And as therapists, boy, don't we all talk to each other about what could we be doing different, and having that kind of a team with where I could just call Ray or I could call Karen. I could say, I'm really struggling with this person, even in my outpatient practice. And, what are you seeing there? And I just need more eyes, a little more objectivity. It's incredible how when we collaborate, we offer the best kind of care for the patients, the families, the clients, and ourselves.
Right
It's
on.
community all the way around,
Yes.
Beth. And you talked about Lori being a pioneer in terms of collaborative care.
Yeah.
That is what you did when you saw the need for community. At every level, Lori's talking about community. The young adult has their community, the family has their community. We as helpers have our community, and it's powerful to,
It's so
I'm
true.
feeling that now, just really amazing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it
really
keeps
amazing. I
it
mean, that's
really.
what has the times that I have felt most hopeful. I think about our family group, Ray, a couple of months ago. That has not left me. I think about it every day, just about. Um, we have a family that one of our longest returning families to family support group. It's been 4 years, and um, the work they've done and the hope they just it emanates from them, which gives other families hope, which gives me hope as a practitioner that it's possible, because there's lots of bad days in this field and there's lots of beautiful days, which is what keeps us here. Well, it's what keeps me here.
Mhm.
I can't imagine doing anything else. I mean, it's really a privilege, it was a privilege to be there that day to listen to them, and the impact that they had on the rest of the community was amazing.
No, it's very good. That's also a classic example of letting go. Because if you think back, and some of us in this Zoom room right now, we're not there when we first started this group. When those parents would start talking, literally they couldn't hold back tears. It was all about tears, and the defeat, and the sense of defeat that just is so overwhelming that they couldn't even start talking without crying, right? And so now what you get to see now is this level of confidence that comes from recognizing that, through this support, through this sense of community, that I'm able to take care of myself. And so whatever happens, right, is one of my favorite sayings that's come out of the rooms is, we do not lead other people to the light by stepping back to the dark, right? We lead other people to the light by becoming the light. And you can't become the light when you're emotionally a mess, right? So you're figuring out how to stabilize yourself and connect and process with other people is powerful, is super powerful. And that's why one of the things that I love doing what I do here is gives us that sense of, hey, I'm part of this process, and it is working.
And I think one of the things that, having been doing this with young people for so long, and really with all of you together, and boy, we all have some stories, don't we? Some major stories, and you got to be creative, because we're up against a lot of fear, and a lot of denial, and a lot of wishing that it wasn't happening to us going on. And what I love is watching as the young adults or the family members, sometimes through their own evolution and growth, they wind up going into this career. And not only in support groups outside of our community, but within our communities, they start giving back in ways. And then through their development, I've seen some family members change their career path and actually start giving back in ways alongside us, as well as the young adults. And there's nothing more incredible than actually being able to stay in touch with a young person who has followed their path, wherever that might be. And sometimes it brings them right beside you.
So funny and ironic that you say that, Lori, because when Beth and I were planning the next couple of common grounds, this was the first piece of a puzzle.
Oh,
And the next piece, and you may recognize some folks that Beth and I have with us. I'll let that be a surprise, but stay tuned, because we're going to do a common ground with some folks that you may remember.
That's awesome.
might have actually been with me last week.
Yep. Yep. Oh, that's awesome. I think this is great. What a rich discussion. Any closing thoughts for families, young adults about
I think we covered it. We definitely covered a lot. I think that if I could, would close on something, I would just say, to keep working the process, because it's like, one of the things that I figured out a long time ago is that complacency, is a terrible enemy, right? It just, you get to a point where you feel like you've set this external goal and that goal is accomplished, and it's almost like, now what? And, now I sit here and do what? The opportunity, like Lori just pointed out, to be able to perform a service that's vital, and recognizing that, you've been in the throes of some pretty terrible stuff, and you've been able to connect and pull yourself through that abyss and become a different and better version of yourself. You got to keep paying that forward, and that's to me, that's the how this continues to work and continues to grow, is to continue to pay that forward and keep living. That's what, to me, what life is about. So that's what I would put out there.
And I think for me, besides just all the wonderful people that I meet along the way, that one of my clients a long time ago said, you can't plant new seeds until you disturb the soil. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we're working with young people, especially teenagers or young people, is that we need to keep in mind that we're disturbing the soil and that we're actually planting seeds. And it may not happen in front of us there, but that's something that, as we're talking with the families, that we also need to let them know that this is part of a journey. It's not required for it to get worse, but it may get worse or slip back before it gets better. So I really use that idea of planting seeds as being something that's so important for all of us.
I'm gonna steal it.
I know, I wrote it down. I think it'll
I'm
be
gonna
a
steal
social
it.
media post.
Borrow it.
She struggled from schizophrenia, and I just learned so much from so many people.
Don't we though?
Oh my gosh.
Me too.
Quote them often.